ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणेश्वरं गुरुवरम् योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षादात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामज्जतव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. We will commence today's Friday Atma Vichara session by listening to Bhagavan's Upadesham. As usual, we have been reading from the book Ramana Answers, Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950, a compilation of all the answers by Master on the subject matter of Atma Vichara by our founder, President A.R. Natarajanji. In the series of questions that we are looking, today we have arrived at question number 65. Initially, we will read the question and we will meditate, ponder about it, and then we will have a 20-minute Atma Vichara session, following which we will have a talk by Akka on Ramana Gita on the same subject of Atma Vichara from the contents that has been captured by Ganapati Muni on the subject matter of Atma Vichara in the Ramana Gita. In the series of questions, we have arrived at question number 65, and the devotee asks Bhagavan, can one read others' mind? The question is, can one read others' mind? The answer Bhagavan says is, the master as usual told him to find his self before worrying about others. Then Bhagavan said, where are others apart from one's own self? Asked the master. So I repeat the question and answer. The devotee asked, can one read others' minds? To which Bhagavan as usual said, the master as usual told him to find his self before worrying about others. Then later Bhagavan said, where are others apart from one's own self? Asked the master. Here, this seems to be a classic case of the 10th man story. That we are very good at counting others and very taking it for granted when it comes to counting one's own self. it is so easily sidestepped by us. So Bhagavan is saying, find out the self. And when he means the self, which is already present within all of us, which is our very nature, which alone actually is, and which we have taken it for granted, or which we pay the least attention, and we pay most attention to this thing called the others. And Bhagavan says that, where are others? Apart from one's own self. Other than the self, where is others? It is like if I see a pot, other than clay, where is the pot? There is absolutely nothing called a pot without the clay. It is the clay which has been formed into something else. As the clay which has been given a form, and then a clay which has given a name, that's about it. It is through and through only clay. If you break it, it is clay. Before it was formed into a pot, it was clay. Even when it is in the form, it is clay. When we break it, it is again clay. So it is through and through only the clay. Now, what is the clay that we are talking about in us? That becomes the most important question. Therefore, Bhagavan asks us to find out that self, that clay, that with which everything is made of, that which alone is. There is nothing others for it, or there is nothing called others, because it's only the self. That ingredient is what Bhagavan is asking us to find out. And we need not have to go anywhere looking for it, because if everything is made out of it, it is even I is made out of the same stuff. So which is the most easily accessible thing for oneself is oneself. Therefore, the best place to find out that material with which everything is made, including oneself, is in the oneself. Isn't it? So that is the best place to find, because it would be a direct experience once we find it. It will not be something that we have to point out to somewhere. And therefore, it is important that we find this self. Now, the only thing which stops us from finding that self is this idea of others. The idea of myself and others. This division. This individual nature which puts a boundary and makes everything else as others, which takes the form to be real, the pot to be real, but forgets the clay, which is the most important thing that we need to understand. Even when we sit in the meditation, even when we understand that the self is I am, there will be the name, there will be a talking, there will be a thought process within us trying to say, oh, I am this, I am. It's just rather than being with the actual experience. Why we should be with the actual experience? When we talk about sahaja, then the self, if it is sahaja for the self to keep claiming, like the way we claim, I am the self, I am that I am. When we try to speak to ourselves about it, if the self is also doing it, then there should have been two noises within our head or within us, isn't it? But the self is so much one, so much, because that alone is, it has nothing else to think of. It is by itself fullness. It alone is. It is the stuff. And therefore, in this natural state, even when the body is moving, even when last week we saw the environment doesn't change, said the master. No matter whether you leave the house, look at me, even if I leave the house and came, as the environment changed much for me, and so is for you. Based on our desires, so will be our environment. So nothing to blame in the environment per se. That will be there the way it is. But even in the midst of this environment, that self supported everything, and it was the only thing with which all of this was made. So it need not have to make any claim. So if you really get back and cut all the thoughts of any sort of claiming, any sort of understanding, any sort of doing, when we simply recognize that this self is the truth and there is nothing for us to claim, there is nothing else to know apart from it, there is nothing else to do, and it is the most sahaja state of ours. And all we need to do is be that. Being that is knowing, not the knowing from a thought process. Again, if we know from a thought process, when we read a statement when everything is only the self, then how is that the self? I am not experiencing it there. All these kind of ideas may come up in the form of a doubt. When we really understand the self, we see that it is the self alone, even in the others. How do we know the others? We know the others only in the consciousness. How do we know that their presence? We know by that presence only. So everything, it is the stuff, that Sat, Chit, Ananda is the stuff with which everything is made up. If you leave the name and form, the knowing of the others or the knowing of oneself, everything is only through that Sat and Chit, through that existence consciousness. That is the sand, that is the clay with which everything is made up. It is because of the existence, everything else appears to exist. It is because of the knowing, everything else is known, including oneself. So that is the real stuff, that is the clay of which all these names and forms are made of. So instead of paying attention to the name and form, which is divided, which appears to be divided, which introduces the notion of division, if you see that stuff, the name, which is a thought process, and the form, which is a shape and other things, then the notion of divisions is automatically built in it. But if you see only that Satchidananda and recognize that our existence and its knowledge is inseparable, and in there is no thoughts. There is no scope for a thought. What is there to be known? It knows itself completely and is very much the peaceful thing. And when we reach there, and as Bhagavan says, like tying a stone, when we dive deep and just reach that pearl, that real silence, of being and that consciousness itself, that Sat Chit itself, and remain in that Sat Chit as Sat Chit. That is all to be done. Where is the scope for doubt? Where is the scope for knowing? Where is the scope for doing? Where is the scope of others in that state? That is why Bhagavan is asking us to repeatedly get back to that self, to that stuff with which everything is actually made, without which all these forms are not going to be sustained, are not going to be there. So therefore, we should turn our attention from this temporary names and forms which appear because of the attention, outward turned attention, and bring it back to that Satchidananda, that real stuff with which alone is, and in which there is absolutely no space for a thought, even to say that I am Satchidananda, because it is Satchidananda itself. Where is the need to claim? And remaining in that perfect state of that being consciousness, Bhagavan asks us to get back to that Sahaja, which is our real nature, here and now. So this claiming entity only appears to be claiming because of the attention given to it. And Bhagavan asks us to turn our attention even from that to the real source of it. Therefore, every thought, when the claiming entity claims, Bhagavan asks us to inquire to whom is this. Then we see that claiming entity, that division entity called the I. And Bhagavan further asks us, what is the reality of that I? And when we go to the source, the Satchit, which alone is the reality of everything, which alone gives the reality to the claiming entity, which alone makes the claiming entity seemingly know everything. When we get back to that source and remain in that self that we are verily are here and now, then we experience that state of oneness where there is nothing other. That is what Bhagavan gives us through this Atma Vichara. And for that, Bhagavan has given us the Brahmastra of the self-enquiry, wherein he asks us to inquire every thought, whether it is good, bad, or ugly. And doesn't matter how many number of thoughts appear, he wants us to keep repeatedly inquiring to whom is this, so that we see that claiming entity, that storyteller which keeps on telling stories within us, and then called the I. And then when we inquire what is the reality of the I, and go to the source of the I, where that I rises from, or what I really claim to be as the I, when we get back to that Satchit Swarupa of ours, with the grace of the Master, and just remain there, it is that state where we say, ooh-ha, ooh-ha, it's peace. And that is the state which Bhagavan takes us with his immense grace, until we recognize our own ease and ever abide in that true state. Bhagavan will make us repeatedly inquire and makes us abide in that truth. The immense grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we could have come to this direct path. Let us do Atma Vichara for the next 20 minutes. Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramana. Namo Ramana. Over to Sharda Akka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. By the immense grace of that self manifest as Ramana, we have been able to dwell on the thoughts of self-inquiry and also to sit for a period of practice of self-inquiry. We have been meditating on the verses of Ramana Gita and the answers given by Bhagavan to Ganapati Muni in the first chapter of Ramana Gita. And we came to the answer, the third answer, wherein he says, Nirvasanena Maunena Sirayam Sahajasthitau Jnani Jnaninam Atmanam Nissandeha Samarthayet. A Jnani knows himself to be a Jnani because of the silence which he experiences. What kind of silence? Nirvasanena Maunena, where there is no trace of any tendency left. And in today's answer, Bhagavan actually summarized all the tendencies, as Dilip also pointed out to us, in the word other, in that division, that primary division which is the first tendency, the tendency of dividing, the tendency of duality, the tendency of seeing or focusing on the other. We saw that it is Loka Vasana, Shastra Vasana and Deha Vasana, the type of vasanas which the scriptures point out to us. The need to acquire knowledge is again based on perceiving something as being outside us, something as not included in the self, something that is not belonging to us already. So we want to acquire it, whether it is mental knowledge or whether it's a physical possession. Knowledge is also a kind of possession. We saw the story of the Roma Maharishi, where the big, huge ant tries to shift a hill of sand from hill of sugar from where it is to its own home. So where it's because of the perception of duality. So when this division of duality is not there, that means all the vasanas have gone away. Nirvasanena Maunena. The vasana is actually a tendency, a habit. And it is a deep-rooted habit. And that habit, Bhagavan points out to us, it has its basis in the perception of oneself as a body, as a form, which is actually other. The primary perception of other starts with seeing oneself as other. The concern with others starts with oneself actually. One does not see oneself as oneself. One sees oneself as another entity. One sees oneself as a body. One sees oneself as experiences. One sees oneself as thoughts arising on the perception that one is a body. So many others. The thoughts are all others. As we take the self for granted, pointed out Dilip, referring to the story of the 10th man. We take the self for granted and we give a lot of importance to the other. So much so that we become so identified with the other. And that is the other, which is the form with which we have become identified. Therefore, in self-inquiry, Bhagavan asks us to recognize what is the other and what is the self. First recognition is what is the other. How is the other manifest in our life? How is the other manifest in our experience? The other is manifest in the form of thoughts. Every time there is a thought, that means I am there and my thought is there. Thought is another entity. It is not I myself. Although I tend to become completely intertwined, interlinked with the thought. I become the very thought. If I feel sorrow, I become sorrow. If I feel joy, I become joy. If I feel anger, I become anger. And in this way, we become intertwined with the thought. But through inquiry, when we try to observe our experiences, we recognize that there is an experience and there is the experiencer. There is sorrow and there is one for whom the sorrow is. I am experiencing the sorrow. It is not as if I myself am sorrow. If I myself am sorrow, will I feel sad? I actually will not. If there is no otherness, there will be no sorrow. As Bhagavan told Jagadishwara Shastri, one of his very ardent disciples of Bhagavan, and when he was a young boy itself, right in Virupaksha cave years, Jagadishwara Shastri was with Bhagavan, and one day Bhagavan started, he said, come, let us go on Giri Pradakshina. It was in the afternoon. And Arunachala is fire. And in the afternoon, in a summer afternoon, it is impossible to step on the rocks of Arunachala. But for Bhagavan, there is nothing, there is no awareness, no consciousness of the body. So he was walking and Jagadishwara Shastri is walking behind him. He is not able to walk. He is not even able to jump and skip and do anything. After a few moments, he said, Bhagavan, it is impossible for me. I cannot do this. I cannot go with you. No matter that I would love to go on a pradakshina with you, no matter that you have asked me to go, it is impossible. I am not able to manage it. So initially, Bhagavan said, what is there? It's all in the mind. He said. But Jagadishwara Shastri said, no, Bhagavan, it is just not possible for me. Then Bhagavan said, he said, think that you are the sun. Suryosmi. He taught him the mantra of Suryosmi. I am the sun. Now, if you are the sun, will you feel heat? You will not feel heat. We feel the heat of the sun because the sun is apart from us. The sun is other than us. So all our experiences are because of otherness. If sorrow itself is by nature, I will not feel sorrow. That will be the I, that's all. There will not be any experiencing, but it comes and goes. Sorrow comes and goes, pleasure comes and goes, anger comes and goes. So it is not I myself. These are all my thoughts. And thoughts are the forms which the perception of the other takes in us. This is the vasana. As Bhagavan says, a primary vasana of recognizing the existence of the other. That is the primary vasana. And in the self, as Dilip said, there is no declaration of anything. There is no declaration of I am happy or I am sad. There cannot be any declaration of anything. There is the pure silence of the self because there is no division in the self. There is no object apart from the self. But how is the self itself experienced? Bhagavan has said it, just by being the self is experienced. Just by being the self, it is experienced. It is not seen as an object. It cannot be experienced as an object. It has to be as it is. It is known as it is. By being the self, one experiences the self, which means that right now we are being something else, or rather, we have become something else. We keep becoming one thing after another, and we keep wanting to become one thing after another. We want to become perfect. We want to become good. We want to become self-aware. We want to become something. We always want to become. We don't want to be. We're always looking at becoming something. And when a desire arises, when any desire arises to become something, that is the vasana. And that will ensure the prolongation of the identity. The moment I want to become something, Bhagavan in fact even says, don't even want to become self-realized. That also is a tendency. He goes up till that point of saying even to be self-realized. But for us, we use the desire for self-realization as the tool to get rid of all the other vasanas. So Bhagavan says, all right, if you have ekachintana, it will help the mind to get destroyed. So we hold on to one vasana. What is that? That one vasana can be that I must be abiding in the self. Or that one vasana can be that I want to surrender everything to Bhagavan. Bhagavan knows. Bhagavan will take care. There is nothing that I need to do. There is nothing that I need to think about. There is nothing that I need to worry about. Bhagavan is in charge. So when I hold on to a single thought, or cultivate that eka chintana or eka vasana, all the other vasanas will be dealt with. Bhagavan gives self-inquiry as that tool, that single tool to hold on to, for this reason that if I hold on to any other tool, there is a possibility of division creeping in. There is a possibility of the otherness creeping in. Even when I think about Bhagavan, I must actually, Bhagavan says, lose myself in that. One should lose oneself in Bhagavan completely. The way Kaulakshmi was. She did not even think that I am so full of love to Bhagavan. I have so much love for Bhagavan. Bhagavan is alone everything for me. When we depict Kaulakshmi, it is her Mukti month. When we depict her in the drama, we depict as if all the other cows are asking her, Lakshmi, you went to Ramanasramam. Every day you go to Ramanasramam and you come. Right from where she was staying in the town. Every morning the calf Lakshmi would come, and then she had grown into a cow. Then also she would come. Morning she will be present in Bhagavan's hall, and at dusk very reluctantly she will go. But the cows ask her, what did you see there in the ashram? She says, I don't know what I saw other than Bhagavan. I could only see Bhagavan, she says. But this is our way of expressing it poetically, our observation of Lakshmi. But if you look at Lakshmi herself, was she thinking that I think only of Bhagavan, I do not think of anyone other than Bhagavan? No, she was just full of Bhagavan, that's all. She had her own physical experiences. She had her difficulties sometimes. When they pierced her nostrils, she was in pain. And what did she do? She ran to Bhagavan. She ran to Bhagavan. If sometimes they did not give her her idlis, she would go to Bhagavan. And Bhagavan would say, "Oh, Amma, you didn't get your idlis today. You didn't get your plantains today. Why didn't please give the plantains to Lakshmi? Give the idlis to Lakshmi." She was attacked by a cheetah. In the night, somehow she escaped from the Goshala and she came running to Bhagavan. And he saw that she had been attacked. All those experiences she underwent, all those difficulties she underwent. In her last moment also, the physical pain she underwent. But Bhagavan said, when he left her side and he came away, he came to the hall for Mother Alagamma. He sat till the very last moment. Till actually, he says that there was some sound of absorption. There was actually the sound of the absorption of the prana in the heart. And after that also he sat for some time. That none of the vasanas should come. And then come up. And he says that he was with Mother. But for Lakshmi he was not there. Because there was no vasana left. So there is no consciousness. When love becomes so overwhelming, the great devotees, the stories of the Periya Puranam, the 63 saints which Bhagavan read as a young boy, the stories, if we read them, we might find that they are very strange, the kind of things which Shiva does. Why does he do such strange things, we may think. So, but the devotees never thought of it like that. They never felt it. For them there was Shiva, and then Shiva was saying something. Or the devotee who was Shiva himself was saying something or asking for something, and they did not have a second thought about it. There was no logic. So, it is either that, or if the mind rises in logic, Bhagavan says in Ashtakam, if we have even the slightest question about the world should be like this, it should not be like this. If this question arises, that means we are applying our own logic on the world. We think we know better how the world ought to be, rather than the way it has been made by God. God has made the world. God has made others. If I want others to be different from what they are, that means I know better than God. That means my logic is rising in me. My reason is rising in me. And if I become conscious of the rise of reason in me, what should I do? I should use vichara. I should use self-inquiry. I must recognize that my surrender is not complete. I am not having 100% acceptance. If I have 100% acceptance of the Supreme, then I will have 100% acceptance of the world. I will have 100% awareness that there is nothing further that needs to be added on to this entity also. Because this entity which I call I is also part of this world. Nothing further, nothing that needs to be done by this entity, nothing that needs to be achieved by this entity, nowhere to go, nothing further to do. When that complete faith is there, then there is no vasana. If that faith is not complete, if Bhagavan says a thought has arisen, then one must apply the tool of inquiry given by him. He says in Ashtaka, Ark, for whom is this thought? From where is it rising? And ask for who am I? And get back to the source. Keep getting back to the source until by the grace of the Supreme, the tendency to move towards an object is completely dissolved in the self. Until that point of total grace, one has to hold on to the practice, and remembering, of course, that this holding on is also happening only by the grace, and hold on to it. Make one's full effort to keep holding on to the practice, to keep getting back to the self. to keep knocking at the door, as the great ones say, keep on knocking, keep on knocking. The door will then be opened by Bhagavan at the right moment, and he will, as Sadhuvam Swami says, Kondu Selvare Urudinam Ramana Idaya Guhayil Ramana Gurunathan. He will take us back into the kingdom of the heart cave. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Dilip, will you say the prayer?
Yes, Akka. Apara Satchit Sukhavadidashe Yasyormimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Ramanam Gabhiram Chinta Vihinam Hrudi Chintayami Chinta Vihinam Hrudi Chintayami. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Thank you.